Merry Meat Buttercups. Thank you for joining me today in my rave review for Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. I say rave because this is nothing but positive. I'm going to happily rant and discuss and review the second book in the Emily Wilde book series. I don't know how many books are going to be in the series. I hope endless amounts of books. I need all of the books regarding Emily and her boyfriend, well actually fiance now, Wendell, and all of the sidekicks and the random fairies and her shadow dog, Shadow, yeah, and just everything. I just need everything in this series to continue on as long as possible, because this series officially, it is near and dear to my heart, even with 2 books out so far. I do know that there will be a third, because in the back it says get ready for the 3rd book, and I'm ready. Okay, I'm ready. I have my tea with me. We're just gonna go on a soliloquy for the second book in the series, though I did want to display the first book because I love the cover and I also love this cover as well. I'll just show it to you all. It is just adorable. It is very whimsical, magical. You think of fairies when you see these covers. That's the whole point, because it's about fairies, but great marketing. And if you did not notice, there are foxes on the bottom cover for the second book. Yes, there are vulpine fairies in the second book. Color me just overwhelmed with emotion. We get to go to Austria for this particular book because Emily Wilde and her fiance Wendell, along with the head of the Dryology department of Cambridge, Professor Rose, and her niece, Emily's niece, Ariadne, are going to find the nexus. And what is the nexus? The nexus is portal, let's go with portal, where you can go into various areas in fairy, the other world, or the Otherlands. And then she is also, by doing so, finding this nexus, also creating a map of the Otherlands, where all the fairies reside. And so she is just living it up. She is living it up with her dreams of knowing all that she can through study and talking to fairies and talking to the villagers that are encountering these fairies. She's having so much fun, and we can see that through not just the first book but also the second book, because she has now gone into a relationship with Wendell. The first book, they're like kind of figuring it out, like they're friends and they kind of have crushes on each other, but there are things that annoy them with each other. And so that is a lot of like digging into the relationship. And then, you know, Wendell saves her, but she also saves a bunch of people as well. And there's a lot of saving in the first book. There's a lot of saving in the second book, because Emily, well, she has to save Wendell, and she does also save these 2 scholars that are lost in fairy, though that's kind of like a side quest. Important side quest, but it's a side quest. The main quest here is finding the nexus, mapping out the Otherlands, and then saving Wendell because he is poisoned by his stepmother, who is actually only half fae. She is mainly human. And that kind of surprises Emily when she goes into the Otherlands, into Wendell's realm specifically, that is located in Ireland. And she, you know, just does things. I don't want to completely spoil the book. I think you should finish the first book and go into the second book just head on. It was very fascinating regarding the choices of Heather and how she portrays fairies. Now, I grew up neo-pagan, so I know a lot about fairies. I don't know everything, okay? Like, I'm not an expert, but I know a lot about fairies, and so there's a whimsical, very familiar vibe with these books, and I think that's why I might love them so much. Heather really dives into the violent overall grimness of all fairies, not just some, but they're basically all pretty bad. Which I have seen other people do before. It's not a surprise, but what I grew up with, that fairies, especially house fairies or fairies that take care of your land, kind of like Poe. Poe is a fairy in a different country, but like Northern Europe. He's in the first book and appears at times in the second book. He is like not a garden fairy. He is a forest fairy, but also a brownie, which means a house fairy. Brownies will take care of land or a house or a barn with a particular family, and though they can be testy if you insult them or you treat them horribly, then yeah, they're gonna take revenge on you. But for the most part, they're pretty good, though in the beginning, Poe was seen as creepy and violent, and if you look at the cover, you can see like these, actually in this cover as well, you can see really long, thin, creepy fingers with long nails. That's Poe in a nutshell, but he is nice because he now has a reason to be by the second book, because Wendell basically took care of him because Poe took care of Emily, and now Poe's like, oh my gosh, I have a family to take care of, and you know, it's Wendell because Wendell is a courtly fae and it's a big deal, right? But the other fairies, very violent, very vicious, very tricky, which I am more used to nice fairies and tricky fairies and sassy fairies. That's what I grew up with. Now, my grandmother and grandfather, and when she was with a Wiccan coven, we all know that there are very violent fairies and elves and other beings. That doesn't mean that there aren't good and tricky and cute and sassy ones as well. But Heather, really the 99% of the time, they are portrayed as violent and evil in varying ways, if you want to use the word evil. Christianity is not brought up. No religion actually is brought up in this series, so use the word evil or not, it's fine. Or bad, how about that? And so I just always enjoyed seeing the goodness of Wendell and I'll go with goodness with Poe. He's a little tricky though. But then portraying the Vulpine fae, there's one in particular named Snowbell. That's not the best name, but we'll just go with it. Emily named him Snowbell, it's okay. Snowbell, at first, they're in like the upper mountains of Austria, trying to find the nexus, trying to find this portal that connects to every realm for the most part. And she's with Rose, Professor Rose. Not the best idea, but they go at it alone. They go in pairs, but he is not prepared. And we stumble upon the Vulpine fae in this clearing, and they attack Rose, but they can't attack Emily because she's connected to Wendell and she has a special, very fancy dancy cloak here. And so then she drags Rose back, and Wendell takes care of him, though he accidentally puts on Rose's ear backwards, so his ear is flipped, okay? Because the Vulpine Fae just kind of rip him to shreds, including Snowbell. But then two of them hitch a ride on Emily's cloak, and Wendell shakes them out of her cloak. And so therefore they are in a debt to Emily, and that's how she befriends, in a way, Snowbell, because Wendell could have easily killed them both, but he let them go. She doesn't really befriend Poe like that. She just she gives, in the first book, she gives him food and stuff and treats him with respect, with caution at first, because you can't trust fairies, right? Even though they can't lie, they can lie. Okay, so it's like a it's very tricky. And I portray that in my book for Obsidian Murders, and the fairies in there. Like, they are tricky and they can't lie technically, but they can. So you have to watch what you say and how you say it. And this is a huge theme in this book, or both books, and I'm just so glad someone caught that. Sometimes you see other fairies portrayed like they are kind of like humans, but they have pointy ears, and they're always pretty, and they're tall, and they're immortal, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, but actually it would be more interesting if you at least followed most of the lore. That would be great. Not my book, though. I'm just really happy that the Emily Wilde series does that, because it's just nostalgic in a weird way for me, because I just grew up believing in fairies because I was neo-pagan. She used to tell me stories about fairies, and there are some of them in both the books that she mentioned, or we had discussions about, so that's always fun as well. I do wonder, I'm wanting to look into fairy stories that are mentioned to see if I can find them somewhere. Though I do have, it's a Barnes & Noble, I think it's a Barnes & Noble edition of Irish fairy tales and folklore. A lot of them in these two novels are Irish fairy tales and folklore, but there are also some Germanic and Norse ones as well. But I am just happy every time I see something that I'm familiar with. And I also love learning about new things. Like, I did not know about Sheeries, which are wolf fairies. And it's like a mix of a fairy that looks kind of human and also a wolf. And they are, I'm pretty sure, from the Unseelie court, or they are just Irish fairies that I did not know about. But that was interesting to learn, and they are pictured very gruesomely. I mean, they are kind of sort of assassins, so makes sense that they're a bit vicious and ugly to look at with all the blood and gore stuck on their fur. Yes, that we figure out in the first couple of chapters, because stepmother of Wendell, she's trying to kill him. I mean, there's just a lot going on, but it's written in a journal way, and sometimes I just can't stand journal books, that type of vibe. But Heather Fawcett does an amazing job of writing in the format of a journal. It's Emily's journal as the main character, yes. And she is so scholarly and a little bit preposterous in the most delightful way, that she also does little footnotes. And there's always, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the vibe of the books, but in the first book and the second book, there is one entry from Wendell, and he makes fun of her doing little footnotes about fairies and fairy tales and fairy scholars and all that stuff. But I just eat that stuff up. I'm just, like, give me more. I want more footnotes. Which I have made fun of another fiction book that does this. I'm not going to say it, but that was pretentious. This is part of the story, part of Emily, part of the vibe. It makes it whimsical. It adds to the world building because it's not on every single page. It does not take up huge amounts of blocked text within the page. I just really, it's just scrumptious. All of it is scrumptious. I just can't get enough. This is, like I said, 5 perfect stars. I hope you read it. I hope you enjoyed this book review, discussion, rant, rave. I don't even know what to call it anymore. It's fine. And I will link the first book's book review and discussion so you can get a taste for the first book as well if you haven't already read it. Do so, and then jump into the Emily Wilde's map of the Otherlands. Thank you so much for watching today. Please don't piss off the fairies. You don't want them to go after you. Really, you don't. I've heard some stories. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.